Okay, so enough of Boolean expressions. Let's go ahead and comment that out. And let's go to the next topic, which is best practice for the curly braces. Curly braces on the same line or on the next. Whenever you speak to people about their preference, whether or not the curly braces, either for a function of some other construct, should be on the same line as some wording or keywording, or should it be on the next line, sometimes you get into a pretty big religious war whether or not you should have it one way or the other. Well, that religious war doesn't have to be in JavaScript, because in JavaScript there's actually an established best practice, and that best practice is not just a matter of style, it's a matter of syntax and how JavaScript engine works. So let me demonstrate that for you real quick. Let me uncomment this. And what we have here is we have two functions. One is function A, another one function B, and we're going to execute function A and then execute function B, logging the output of each function. So function A follows a style is where it's always putting the curly braces on a new line. So function A starts and the curly braces on a new line, and it returns an object. Actually, this is an object literal. And don't worry about that. We're going to talk about objects a little bit later, but the point is this is something that needs to be here, which is a curly brace. So it's returning the object literal, and it's also putting the curly brace on a new line. Function B does exactly the same thing, except it follows the style that puts the opening curly brace on the same line as the function declaration and on the same line as the return statement. Now let's go ahead and execute function A and then execute function B and see what it gives us. Let's go ahead and save that. Did you expect that to happen? The first value from function A is undefined. Now, why is that undefined? Well, this actually brings up another interesting issue that is going on in JavaScript. The reason it's undefined is because what the JavaScript engine does behind the scenes when you execute this code is it looks at the return statement, doesn't see anything after it, and places for you a semicolon right after it. So basically what this function A is doing is starting to execute and immediately returning, and it's returning nothing. And since it's returning nothing, when we try to output nothing, it gives us undefined. As a side point, even though semicolons at the end of statements are optional in JavaScript, it is pretty much an accepted best practice to always put them there. Now, there's some minor, I would say very minor controversy about that, and there are people out there that insist that they want to have it without the semicolons at the end. However, by and large, people put semicolons and are very strict about it, so you should probably follow the best practice of the majority. So now you understand why in this case it returned undefined, and in this case it's actually returning the object with the name value pair, name being the name property and value being Yaakov. Okay, so let's go ahead and comment this out and go to our last topic for this lecture, which is the for loop. What language can there be without a for loop? Let's go ahead and comment that out. And here's a for loop. Well, this for loop is doing something very simple. It's defining a sum variable to be 0 to begin with, and then it's looping from 0 to 9 and summing up everything in between. And then it's outputting what the sum from 0 to 9 is. So let's go over this for loop real quick. So just like many languages, the for loop has three parts to it. First is the initialization part of initialization of the counter variable or other conditions. The second one is the condition that the engine will check to see whether or not the loop should be run again. And the third one, some sort of either increment or decrementer or something like that. So the first thing is we're declaring a variable I equal to 0. That is going to be our starting point. By the way, if this variable I has been declared in this scope already once, declaring it again with a var would be a syntax error. So if I have a for loop a little bit above it that also has var I equals 0, this for loop would just start with I equals 0. I don't have a for loop above, so I will go ahead and declare the variable I equals 0. Jumping to the last part, we see I++. Well, this is another one of those shorthand notations for I equals to I plus 1. It's the increment operator. In order to make this a little bit shorter to type, I++ will do. There's a very similar operator, by the way, that is I minus minus that subtracts 1 from whatever variable it's applied to. In this case, we want to increment it by 1, so it's I++. So we're starting with 0. In the very first time, I is being compared to 10, and 0 is less than 10, and I is being incremented by 1. Then the body of the loop executes, and after that, when we hit the curly brace, it comes right back, increments I by 1, and then checks it again. Is I, in this case, 1 less than 10? It will go again and again and again until I reaches 9, in which case it will go ahead and execute the loop one more time, increment I to become 10, and 10 is not less than 10, and it will go ahead and exit the loop and output this line for us. So let's actually go ahead and put a console.log in here, and we'll output I as the loop keeps going. So let's go ahead and save that and take a look at the result. So as you can see, it's going all the way from 0 to 9, and the sum of 0 through 9 is 45. So we went over quite a bit in this lecture, so let's quickly summarize. We went over the string concatenation, and we went over math operations and how the typical precedent rules applies there just like it would apply in pretty much all the other languages. And if you want to know more about it, there's certainly much more to learn about it. You could go to the Mozilla Developer Network and delve deeper into that documentation. We spoke about type coercion, that is dynamically converting a type to a different type for either addition or comparison or a different type of other operations that you would need both sides of the operand to have the same type for. We also spoke about the regular and strict equality, the regular equality being with double equals and the strict equality being with triple equals. And the big difference between them is that the strict equality will first compare to see whether or not both sides are the same type. And if they're not, it will not consider them equal. It will not check anything more. So type coercion will happen with double equals, the regular equality, but strict equality prevents type coercion. We also spoke about what is true and what is false in JavaScript, what is considered true and what is considered false in JavaScript. We also talked about opening curly brace placement. It's not just a style in JavaScript. In JavaScript, it's very important that you adapt the style of putting the opening curly brace on the same line as the function definition or a object definition and so on. Now, as a general good practice, always place semicolons at the end of every statement. Now, there are some that disagree, and I provided a link here for you here to an article that makes a really good case as to why you might not want to do that, or at least might not have to do it, absolutely have to do it. Kind of makes fun of the people who insist on it. But the bottom line is most people do that and place the semicolon at the end of pretty much every statement. So you should probably adapt it no matter what anyway. And last but not least, we spoke about the basic for loop syntax, and I showed you some simple code to sum up numbers between 0 and 9.